Hello, my friend. I sincerely appreciate you being here and watching this video. It means a lot to me. And if you feel inclined to subscribe to the channel, that small action would truly make my day. So let's get started. My name is Robert. It was roughly 5 months after my wife passed away when I finally faced the decision to let go of her car. It had sat untouched in our driveway since the moment she was gone. I figured selling it would be a manageable, necessary step toward moving forward. But what I thought would be a routine task ended up becoming something much more profound, something that shook me to my core. While getting the car ready for sale, I found something that completely unmoored me and forced me to rethink everything I believed I knew. Everything about Nancy, about our life, about who we were together. After she died, it was like the framework of my world collapsed. That's the best way I can describe it. What used to matter suddenly didn't. Days blurred into each other and the nights dragged on, pressing down on me like a heavy blanket I couldn't shake off. Every morning began the same. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, trying to summon enough willpower to get out of bed. I still had obligations. Work didn't stop. Bills still needed to be paid. So I followed the routine: shave, shower, get dressed. But underneath all that, I wasn't really living. I was simply getting by, physically present, emotionally absent. Even being at work felt like a punishment. I'd sit in front of my computer, eyes glazed over, not truly absorbing anything on the screen. Life felt like something I was watching from the outside, like there was a barrier between me and everyone else. That's the thing about grief. It disconnects you. My thoughts constantly returned to those final weeks before she passed. Her death wasn't a surprise, and yet it still crushed me. Nancy had breast cancer. We didn't know until it had already advanced. By the time she was diagnosed, it had metastasized to her lungs. It moved in silence. The symptoms, constant coughing, tightness in her chest, only appeared when it was already stage 4. The doctors didn't sugarcoat it. There was no cure, only the possibility of buying time. And we held on to that time with everything we had. She was prescribed treatments. She never complained, never resisted. Most days she even smiled. But I saw through it. I saw how much pain she carried behind her brave face. On her worst days, she couldn't even get out of bed. That's when everything else lost importance. I pulled back from work immediately. Nothing else mattered more than being by her side. If I wasn't at the office, I was with her. I took her to every appointment, stayed with her through every procedure, tried to be strong even while I was crumbling inside. Our lives became tethered to hospitals and clinics. Each visit felt like a gamble. I sat there, tense, hoping for anything that resembled hope. But deep down, I knew we were only delaying the inevitable. Her energy faded slowly. She became quieter, slept longer. Then one morning, I woke up beside her and she was simply gone. No goodbye, no final words, just gone. It felt like the universe had stopped breathing. The days that followed, her funeral, the condolences, the flowers, passed by in a fog. Family and friends were generous with their support. They brought meals, shared comforting words, hugged me tightly. They said things like, "She's in a better place now," or "At least she's not suffering anymore." I nodded politely. I thanked them, but none of it made a dent in the ache. Her pain had ended, mine was just beginning. After the service, everyone returned to their routines. But I came back to a house that felt hollow. The silence was overwhelming. Her impression still lingered in the bed. Her essence echoed through every room. It wasn't just that life had changed, it had fractured, and I didn't know how to begin putting the pieces back together. Nancy and I were married for 5 years, though our connection went further back. Our relationship was never a straight line. Sometimes we were inseparable. Other times we weren't sure whether we belonged together at all. But no matter how far we drifted, we always found our way back. Looking back, I think those earlier, uncertain years taught us more about each other than most couples ever learn. We knew each other's fears and flaws long before we exchanged vows. So when we finally did get married, I believed we were choosing each other with clear eyes and open hearts. That didn't mean it was always easy. We argued, sometimes over silly things, other times over issues that felt like they might tear us apart. But no matter how hard things got, we kept choosing one another. I never believed our marriage was perfect, but I always knew it was honest. One of our greatest heartaches was our struggle to have children. It was something we both dreamed about early on, but life had different intentions. We endured 2 miscarriages, and then, most painfully, a stillbirth. Those experiences didn't just hurt, they changed us. We mourned in different ways. After the stillbirth, we sought medical clarity. That's when we learned about Nancy's condition, antiphospholipid syndrome, or APS. It's an autoimmune disorder where the body mistakenly attacks its own proteins. For Nancy, it caused blood clots that blocked the flow of oxygen and nutrients to our unborn babies. That was the root of all our losses. The news shattered us. Nancy kept it together in the doctor's office. But when we got home, she collapsed onto the couch and wept. I held her, feeling helpless. We didn't need to say it out loud. We both knew we couldn't keep trying. The emotional cost was too high. Eventually, we explored adoption. We read up on agencies, browsed profiles, had long conversations. But every time we tried to move forward, we hit a wall. We just couldn't align ourselves. Not because we lacked love, but because the wounds were still raw. Over time, the conversation stopped. Not from disinterest, but because facing that pain again felt unbearable. That chapter left an invisible scar on us both. We carried that sorrow quietly. We showed up to social events, celebrated others, answered politely when asked if we were okay. But deep down, we were still hurting. Our marriage wasn't some romantic fantasy, but it was forged in love, tested by trials, and held together by shared strength. After Nancy died, the days became hazy blurs. The house lost its warmth. It stopped feeling like a home and instead became a museum of her memory. Her toothbrush stayed in the cup. Her favorite sweater remained draped on the couch. I could still smell her perfume lingering in the closet. Walking into the kitchen and seeing her favorite mug could reduce me to tears. It was as if every corner of the house whispered her name. More than once I thought about leaving. I even opened my laptop and browsed listings in faraway cities, wondering if distance might somehow lessen the grief. The choices felt endless, the uncertainty unbearable, and the fear of losing the last traces of her paralyzed me. Even though staying surrounded by her belongings stung deeply, the thought of parting with them cut even deeper. It took 3 months after her death before I could finally push myself to begin sorting through her possessions. I started in the room we had shared, opening her drawers, sliding through her side of the closet, and touching the nightstand that had always been hers. Every object I picked up felt like I was peeling away another piece of her. I couldn't bring myself to discard a single thing. Not yet. Instead, I gently packed everything into boxes and carried them to the spare bedroom. I kept telling myself I'd deal with it all someday, but the truth was, I needed the illusion that she still lingered somewhere in the house. Part of me needed a closed door behind which I could pretend she hadn't vanished completely. When you're living inside what remains of someone you loved, even the smallest step forward feels like betrayal. I wasn't ready to leave her behind. I don't think I even grasped what that truly meant. What I did understand was that every night when I climbed into our bed alone, it wasn't healing. It was just enduring. Half a year passed after Nancy's death before I could even think about selling her car. Until then, it sat motionless in the driveway, untouched and slowly deteriorating. Its tires were deflating, and a dull layer of dust coated the windshield. That car still felt like a piece of her. Each time I walked past it, it was like walking by a memory still breathing. Sometimes just before dawn or long after midnight, I'd slip into the driver's seat, her seat, shut the door, and sit there in silence. I wouldn't start the engine. I'd just sit, Her scent still clung to the upholstery. Her lip balm remained tucked in the console. Her sunglasses were still nestled in the glove box. In those quiet, motionless moments, I could almost convince myself she hadn't truly left. Sometimes I wept. Other times I simply stared at the dashboard, either lost in memory or completely numb. When it was over, I'd wipe my eyes, draw a deep breath, and walk back inside as if it hadn't happened. But the truth kept pressing in. The car wasn't being used. It was just slowly falling apart. And I began to understand. Holding on to her things wouldn't bring her back. It wouldn't soothe the ache, and it certainly wouldn't help me move forward. Eventually, I made a decision. It was time. I'd clean the car, take a few photos, and list it for sale online. That morning, I got up early, set on the task. I gathered a bucket, soap, and a sponge. I started with the exterior, scrubbing it with care. If I was going to photograph it, it needed to look good. I didn't rush. I wanted to do it right. Inside, I took my time, lifting the floor mats, dusting the dashboard, wiping every crevice. When I opened the glove box, I expected the usual: old receipts, the manual, tissues, maybe some scraps of paper. But buried under all that was something I hadn't expected. A small, slightly misshapen journal. Its corners were bent, the cover worn and faded from years of use, but I recognized it instantly. It was Nancy's. She'd had it even before we got married. I could picture her scribbling in it during quiet evenings, curled on the couch or sitting alone at the kitchen table with her tea. I'd never asked what she wrote. That notebook had always been hers, private, untouchable. Now, holding it in my hands, it felt like a lost piece of her preserved in time. I opened it, and the sight of her handwriting on the first page hit me like a wave of memories. I didn't know what I would find in those pages, but I couldn't stop. I needed to feel close to her again. I had no idea how heavy those words would become. Back then, I respected her privacy. The early pages were light, lists of hopes, places she wanted to visit, goals she had set. But as I read on, her writing shifted. She filled those pages with uncertainty, doubts about herself, questions about whether she was enough, or if she was making the right choices. Fears I never knew she had, some about life and death, others much smaller, yet just as powerful. She worried she'd never live up to her parents' expectations. She feared disappearing into the role of wife. These were thoughts she never shared aloud, only wrote down in these private pages. She even recorded little moments from our life together that I'd long forgotten or hadn't even noticed. After our first miscarriage, she described how I had sat at dinner scrolling through my phone. She had wanted to talk, but kept quiet because I looked so tired. That one broke something inside me. It felt like discovering a shadow version of our marriage, one where she had carried more than I ever knew. She had borne the weight of it alone. I started skipping ahead in the journal. Some entries were simple reflections on daily routines. But then I reached the part written after our second miscarriage. That entry stopped me cold. She described being broken, body and soul. She wrote that we began to drift apart. She immersed herself in her work. I buried myself in mine. We were two people grieving the same loss, but walking separate paths. And in that emptiness, she reconnected with someone from her past, an old boyfriend. I would later learn he was married too. At first, she called him a friend, someone who understood, someone who listened. But soon their connection deepened. Their conversations turned personal, then emotional. Then came the physical touches, and more. She said being with him reminded her of the person she used to be, before she felt invisible. There's no real way to explain what it felt like reading that. But I kept turning the pages, even though every word made me want to hurl the journal away and pretend I hadn't seen any of it. It didn't stop there. She wrote that even after the cancer diagnosis, even while I was reducing my hours, staying beside her in the hospital, holding her hand, she was still in contact with him, still texting, still letting him visit. That was the blow that hurt the most. I remembered him coming to the hospital once, bringing flowers. He didn't stay long. I'd shaken his hand, thinking he was just a thoughtful friend. That memory now felt like salt in a wound. She kept writing, even as her strength faded. The final pages were short, scattered. But through it all, she never told me. Not once. I walked back into the house with the journal in my hand, and the most agonizing truth was this. She was gone, and I would never get the chance to ask her why. In the days that came after, it wasn't her absence through death that lingered most. It was the hollow quiet she left behind. A new kind of sorrow took hold in me, one that weighed more, settled deeper. Nearly a month after I stumbled upon her journal, I found myself immersed in the pages, uncovering a version of her I hadn't fully seen while she was alive, distracted as I had been. I barely ate. Her death had already torn something raw inside me, and the journal carved a fresh wound right beside it. I didn't know how to carry both of those pains at once. That's when the realization finally struck. I couldn't pretend anymore that I had the strength to manage it all alone. Quietly, and with more hesitation than I'd like to admit, I started seeing a therapist. I wasn't sure what I hoped therapy would give me, maybe just a space where no one would tell me to move on or hand me false comfort. What I found instead was a room where I could let my emotions breathe without judgment. Week by week, I began peeling back the layers. Grief, betrayal, the guilt I had buried, and the mask I wore to seem fine to everyone around me. My therapist never tried to fix it all at once, but they helped me understand something crucial. It was okay to be heartbroken and angry at the same time. I realized I could grieve the woman I loved and still acknowledge the pain she caused me. Those two truths could live side by side. Slowly, the heaviness began to ease. I wasn't being crushed by it anymore. I stopped defining myself solely as a widower, or the man left reeling from betrayal. Gradually, I saw a different reflection in the mirror, someone worthy of beginning again. Eventually, I let go of the car. I didn't rush it. I waited until I truly felt ready. Then, I sold it. Most of Nancy's belongings were packed away. Some I donated. Others, I parted with in silence. Every decision was difficult, but each one meant something. They were small but powerful signs that I was starting to move on. I no longer viewed myself only through the lens of what had been done to me. Life had handed me deep pain, but I didn't let it keep me shattered. I kept choosing to show up for myself. I made a decision, not just to survive, but to truly live. And with that, our story comes to its final chapter. I'd be honored to hear what this brought up for you. Feel free to share in the comments. Thank you for sharing your time with me. If this spoke to you, take a look at the other stories here on the channel. Until we meet again, my friend.